Hey guys, what's up? This is Let's Ride USA, and in this week's new rider series video, we're going to be covering probably one of the most important videos for a new rider, which is how to ride a dirt bike. You know, before you get a dirt bike, or even maybe if you already have a dirt bike and you're getting ready to go ride, it can be scary, it can be very challenging, but don't get discouraged. I'll be honest, when I started riding, I started out in my backyard, just going around in circles and practicing upshifting and downshifting, and honestly, it was very difficult. I had a very tough time with it. I didn't think that there was any way I was going to be able to get out into the woods, out into the trails, hit jumps and stuff like that. But sure enough, I practiced every single day, and with only a short period of time, I got out into the woods and actually started riding some trails, and it was awesome. But definitely was a little bit frustrating at first, but don't get discouraged. Keep going with it, keep practicing, and you'll get the hang of it. Before we dive into this, I recommend you go check out the previous episode, which was reading RPMs, where I talk about the whole basis of RPMs and what it all means. I recommend you go check that out because it's very important to the shifting concept, which we're going to get a little bit more in depth here. It's very important. It's something that I wish I had a little bit more explanation to me when I started riding. When I started riding, basically I was taught when the engine gets louder, shift. And basically that's what it is. But in the previous episode, I just kind of gave a little bit more in-depth detail of that. So without further ado, let's go into how to ride a dirt bike. So before you hop on the bike and start riding, there's a couple things you need to check. First, you want to make sure that your gas is on. This is often overlooked, and sometimes it can be off. I've done it plenty of times where I went for a ride and my gas was off. You get down the road, it dies out, and you're like, what happened? Very simply, you probably just had your fuel off. So make sure you turn it to the on position. Next, check the carburetor. Most bikes will have a choke. For this bike, all the way up is choke on, one down is half choke, and then all the way down is no choke. If you're cold starting, usually you'll need to turn the choke on. This allows a little bit more airflow into the engine, that way it's easier to start up. Right now my bike is hot, so I'm going to put it all the way down to no choke because I don't need it, but you want to make sure that regardless, when you start riding, you do not want your choke to be on. Choke is only used for idle situations. When you start up, you're going to turn the choke on, start the bike, let it idle for a little bit, drop it down to no choke, idle up for a little bit more, and finally when you're ready to ride, drop it down all the way to no choke. You do not want the choke on while you're riding. So that's the next thing you want to check. Also, you just want to make sure your bike is in good working condition. Want to make sure your chain is nice and tight. Make sure it's oiled up. Also, very important, make sure that there is oil in the machine. Very simply, just pull the dipstick out and check the oil. Also want to just make sure your tires are all aired up. Everything is nice and tight. Everything is just in working order. And if that is all good to go, you're ready to hop on the bike. So now that we're on the bike, we're just going to go over the controls. Over here on the left is the clutch. We're going to be talking more about that in just a little bit. Over on the right, you have the front brake. Always want to be careful with the front brake. You never want to give it too much, or else the front end is going to tuck and you're going to dump the bike. Now, if you're used to riding bicycles, usually the brakes are up here. But as I just said, this is not a brake. This is a clutch, and this is the front brake. So the back brake is located down here. It's a pedal. Honestly, it's a little bit difficult getting used to. When I started riding, it was a little bit weird, but you definitely get used to using a brake pedal. It's just something that you got to get used to, and once you get used to it, you don't even think twice about it. Most bikes are equipped with a kill switch. This bike is located on the left side of the handlebar, and it's just a little button. All this does is just turns the bike off. That way, when you're done riding, pushing that button, bike shuts off, and you're good to go. Finally, don't want to miss this. Over here on the right is the throttle. This is what allows you to control how much power you have going to the rear wheel. So now that you know where your controls are, pretty much how everything works, now it's time to start off the bike. What you're going to want to do is make sure that the bike is in neutral. Right now the bike is in gear. The way you check that is if you just roll back and forth and it won't roll, then you are in gear. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to get into neutral. Right now I'm in first gear. We're going to quickly cover the gears. Before we get going, I'm going to quickly go over the gears on a bike. They're different for every motorcycle, so you just want to get familiar with what your gear ratio is. On this bike, it's 1 down, 4 up. So what that means is right now we're in neutral. You know you're in neutral because the bike can roll. If you're in gear, for example, I'll put it into first gear, the bike will not roll. When you're ready to start the motorcycle, you want to make sure that the bike is in neutral and not in gear. As I said, my bike is 1 down, 4 up, so right now I'm in neutral. 1 down, which is going to be first gear. Pulling the clutch, hit the shift lever, and now I am in first. Now it's 4 up, so now I'm in first gear. So what I'm going to do is pull on the clutch and shift up. So now I'm second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and fifth gear. Like I said, some bikes have 6 gears. It's different for every bike. Just get familiar with what your gear ratio is and it'll help out a lot. Right now my bike is in first gear, so all I'm going to do is put it in neutral by simply pulling in the clutch and finding halfway between second and first, which is usually just half a click up. Sometimes, I know I had a difficult issue with it when I first started out. Just don't get discouraged. You'll eventually get to neutral. It's just in between first and second gear. I know sometimes, you'll give it too much power and then you're in second gear and then you try to kick it back and it's in first gear. Sometimes it does get frustrating, but don't get discouraged. All it is half a click up from first gear and then you will be in neutral. Okay, so now time to start the bike up. This bike is kickstart only. Some bikes are equipped with electric start. If they are, this process is a lot easier because all you have to do is hit a button and she starts right up. In this case, you have the Kickstarter, which is right here. How to start it up is exactly in the name, Kickstarter. All you got to do is kick it and it starts right up. Okay, so now we're about to go. To get the motorcycle moving, pull in the clutch, shift down 1 gear to first. For new riders, it's always recommended that you start in first gear. So now you have to be able to control the clutch and the throttle so you don't stall. If you're used to driving manual transmission cars, the process is very similar. Only difference is you're dealing with a clutch lever and a throttle instead of pedals. Now that we're in first gear, we're ready to go. What you're going to want to do is slowly let the clutch out. Once you start to feel the motorcycle go, that's when the clutch is being engaged. That's when you want to apply throttle. You don't want to let the clutch out too fast, or else usually it's going to stall. In this case it didn't, but most bikes, it'll stall out. Also, you don't want to let the clutch out and give too much throttle, or else this will happen. And if you're a new rider, it can be very, very scary if that does happen. So the way to control that is I usually like to sit a little bit farther up on the bike. That way if it does happen to come up, you have enough weight over the bike that it'll bring it back down. To get going properly, you want to slowly let the clutch out and also apply a little bit of throttle. Once you start to feel the bike take off, you do not have to let go of the clutch. This is what I like to call riding the clutch. Once you feel that you are at a steady pace, that is when you can let go of the clutch. Let's go over that one more time. Alright, we're in first gear. Slowly let the clutch out and slowly apply throttle at the same time. Not too much. Right now, that was way too much. You can hear the RPMs going up, and I'm really not going anywhere. that's an improper balance. I'm giving it too much throttle and not enough clutch. You gotta find the right balance of enough throttle and enough clutch to get going. And once you get going, like I said, you don't immediately have to let off the clutch. You can ride it a little bit until you feel comfortable to completely let off, and you can get going. Slowly let off the clutch, give it a little bit of throttle, and now we're going. Now we're in first gear, we're coasting, but it's already time to shift. So now to shift. If you take a look at my last video, we go in a little bit more in depth into RPMs. But to give a brief summary, once you hear the engine start to go up like this, that's when you know it's time to shift. So to shift, all you have to do is go off the throttle. This is very important. You do not want to pull in the clutch and have the throttle going and try to shift all at the same time. So as you're going, off the throttle, pulling clutch, upshift, and then you're good to go. Let's go over that a couple more times. We're going to shift, off the throttle, pull in the clutch, upshift, and then let the clutch and throttle out just as you did when you first started off. You want that even balance of letting off the clutch and applying throttle. It's definitely an art. It's not something that you can get very easily. It's definitely going to take some time. Just don't get discouraged, and sure enough, you will be able to get it. Okay, so now you're going. You're riding around. It's a great day. Finally picking up some speed on the bike, but now you need to slow down. So to come to a stop, pull in the clutch, let off the throttle, press in the back brake first, then you can apply the front brake. Now we're in a complete stop. However, we're in 5th gear, so if we start to get going in 5th gear, it's going to stall out. So to prevent this, we need to downshift, and now we're going to go cover downshifting. So now we're in 5th gear, we're riding around, and you can hear the RPMs drop. Now that the RPMs are getting lower, that's when you want to downshift to prevent the engine from stalling. So, very simply, pull in the clutch, you can apply a little bit of brake, and then press down with the shift lever, and same thing, let off the clutch and apply the throttle. Alright, now we're going to do second to first. Exact same thing, off the throttle, pull in clutch, apply the brakes, downshift, and then get going again. Now you have to be very careful with downshifting, because if you're in too high of an RPM and going too fast and you downshift to too low of a gear, it's dangerous for the engine, and it'll also mess up your tires because you'll probably end up doing a skid kind of like this, and you can get out of control and it's not good. To prevent this, just make sure you're in the right RPM, you're going the right speed to be able to smoothly downshift without having to skid out or anything like that. This is what an improper downshift kind of sounds like. So we're coming into this corner, apply the brakes, off the throttle on the clutch, downshift, back on the clutch, and we're riding away. Basically, it's just evening out throttle and clutch and knowing when the right times to shift are.